What's up, guys? Today we're going to be going over the UFC Fight Night predictions. Tatsuro Taira versus Park here. I know I missed last week with the Abu Dhabi card. Is what it is. What can you do, right? So we're just going to hopefully get this done and quick and out of here. So we're going to start with our first thing, which is the big prospects of the card. We have a bunch of, first of all, before we do that, as always, a young prospect is somebody who's not ranked, but he's fought decent or, it looks good in the UFC. He's fought decent opponents, I should say, and looks decent in the UFC. So what do we got? We got HyunSung Park. Obviously, main event man himself. He's getting a big step up in competition against Taira. He's had 3 straight finishes in the UFC. He can kind of finish this fight any way he wants in the striking or the grappling, and he does have a lot of rear naked choke finishes. So yeah, finisher, fun, exciting, flyweight. I mean, what can you look for, or what more can you really ask for in a prospect, right? At least at the lower weight classes. So that is HyunSung Park. And then we have Kevin Vallejos, who very, very hyped up prospect. A lot of people are high on him. He's a powerful striker, has finished all but 3 of his fights he's had in general. So, he's had, I think, 17 fights now, 15-2, 15-1. I don't even remember. Anyway, either way, pretty good. Got a lot of hype behind him. And he even had a semi-decent competitive fight against Silva, which he lost. But he did have a competitive fight there. And that says a lot considering he's only 23 years old. He is very young in this game, as well as just in general. So he has a lot of room to grow. People are really high on him for that. Moving on, we have Rinya Nakamura. Now, this man, similar to Austin Bashi, Nakamura is an amazing Japanese wrestler, but he lost his last fight. And what's more concerning than anything is he lost his last fight because he decided, I am not a wrestler anymore. What goes on inside these fighters' heads, who knows? But what's important is that he's still a prospect, young in the game, still looking to improve, and hopefully he's going to be a little bit smarter, a little bit better fight IQ, you would hope, when he makes this comeback this weekend. And similar story here with Austin Bashi, that he lost his last fight, but he lost it to C-Rod. Christian Rodriguez, who is the prospect killer. That's literally what he's known for at this point in his career. So that's not as bad. And also, he at least tried to fight his way. He didn't just decide, I'm only going to strike, even though I'm a grappler. So Austin Bashi, I think, is a little more on the right track. But him and Nakamura looking to get on the right track there. But still, prospects in the game. Next up, we got the big veteran names. Literally nobody. Other than Neil Magny. And Neil Magny's fought basically everybody ever in the welterweight division. He is the ultimate gatekeeper when it comes to who is going to be ranked, who isn't going to be ranked. And yeah, I mean, what more can you say about Neil other than this man has fought every and anybody in his division? Moving on. Fan favorites. We have exciting fighters who, you should probably tune in for. They might not even be the biggest of names, but very exciting fighters. And the first one we got is Rebecki. And he had a fight of the year contender against Oralby. And he really put on a really, really great scrap there. And it was a tough fight for both of them. Split decision. He ended up winning. But what's important about Rebecki is he's won 4 out of his last 5 fights in the UFC, and he can finish the fight with his hands or his grappling. He's kind of just a well-rounded fighter there. And then there is Esteban Ribovics, who is kind of in a similar boat, actually, that he had a fight of the year against Daniel Zellhuber last year in the Sphere. But he is not so much of a well-rounded fighter. He's more of a exciting striker, a lot of power, can knock out anybody really with his hands, feet, knees, elbows, doesn't matter what body part. But yeah, Ribovics got robbed in his last fight, doesn't matter. He's back and he's fighting again. So that's why he's a fan favorite. Exciting, puts on fights of the year. Moving on, we have the fight of the night, and of course it has to go to Tatsuro Taira versus HyunSung Park. this is the best fight on the card. More importantly, it's the highest level fight. And it's the most interesting matchup, really, I feel like. It has a interesting stylistic matchup. Both are fairly well-rounded fighters. And the trajectory of these fighters' careers are kind of on the line here. Is Taira going to continue his losing ways here after he lost his last one to Rafael? Or is he going to kind of make his stake and be like, hey, I am a top 5 fighter in this division? Or is Park going to prove to us that he is one of those guys? He can compete with the best of the best and make a really meteoric rise into the rankings here. We will find out. But yeah, moving on. All right. I changed up the style just a little bit here. I didn't really feel like all of these fights deserved full breakdowns. So I just have the fighters here on the sides as well as the odds and their names. And then we just have that for a couple of fights. So what do we got? Piera Rodriguez versus Kellen Souza. Piera has lost 2 out of her last 3 in the UFC, and she did have a DQ loss, so that's not really that huge of a deal in one of those losses, but nonetheless, she is a decision merchant, has generally decent grappling and can strike okay as well. Kind of just the general decent WMMA fighter, right? And then there's Kellen, who lost a close split decision to Angela Hill in her last fight. I thought she won, but not against Angela Hill winning. And then really before that, she was winner of 4 out of her last 5. She's been fighting well and fighting a lot of good competition. So that's really the background on those two. But what do I think? Honestly, I think the power of Souza is going to be what puts her over the top. To me, she is one of the better fighters in WMMA. She can kind of grapple well enough that she can make herself competitive in most fights, and she can also strike and hit you with something that actually hurts a little bit. So I'm going to go with Souza via 29-28 decision. And then next fight we got is going to be Estevan. Oh my gosh. Wow, I am struggling. Next fight we got is Rafael Estevam versus Felipe Bunes. Sorry about that. Esteban is undefeated, and he's kind of, doing really good in his career. 2 fights ago, he fought Charles Johnson and won. I mean, that's a great win there. I mean, Charles Johnson has beat some good opponents and is a UFC veteran at this point. Really, Estevam is a good grappler and has a lot of finishes on the ground. Bunes, on the other hand, he has a lot of first-round finishes, but he's also lost like a third of his fights he's ever had. So really, this doesn't seem to be that close, and the odds suggest that as well. Esteban shouldn't have any problem beating Bunes, and he should be able to out-grapple him or strike if he really wants, and just dominate this fight via the 30-27 dominant decision. And those were the odds I have for those fighters. Moving on, Austin Bashi versus John Yannis. Austin Bashi, again, a prospect, USA, kind of wrestler. And, he lost his last fight against Christian Rodriguez, but before that, he was undefeated and had a lot of different ways he won the fight. He had won via a ground and pound submission or decision or even knockouts, right? So he can win this a lot of different ways. Yannis, on the other hand, no UFC experience. Granted, Bashi only has 1 UFC fight, so, is what it is. But he has a lot of wins via TKO and decision. No submission wins, though, which makes me think that he isn't that great of a grappler. And Yannis has 4 split decisions in his career. Like, he makes it close. But nonetheless, Bashi is a talented enough grappler. He should be able to out-grapple Yannis if he so chooses. Really, I just don't really see Yannis having a real path to victory against Bashi in terms of skills. One thing I do worry about is cardio. Yannis has gone to the 4th and 5th round before, so he does have decent cardio, at least. He can make it that far. And so it could be a concern eventually. But for now, really, I'm not going to worry about it. And I'm just going to go with a 30-27 victory, Austin Bashi decision win there. And, I think it might be a closer third round, but really, in general, just not going to be that close of a fight. And then we have Nick Klein versus Andre Pulyaev, and Nick Klein has lost his last fight against Mansour Abdul Malik via a vicious second round knockout. But really, he's looked decent before that. Pulyaev, on the other hand, he has won his last 5 fights before getting beat in England by Christian Leroy Duncan. So really, both guys losing to decent fighters there, but looks okay before that. Really, all I'm seeing is Pulyaev is a better grappler, I feel like, but Klein gets the back a lot, and he has 3 rear naked finishes, so grappling could be anyone's game. Really a close fight. Striking doesn't look intriguing by either of these guys. I would not bet on this fight if I were you, but I'm going to go with Nick Klein, and the reason why is because he's from Wisconsin, and, I got to root for Wisconsin, man. Midwest all the way. I have a negative 105 odds, basically anyone's game, 49% or something like that. That is that fight. And then we have Rodolfo Viera versus Tresean Gore. Viera is a BJJ black belt, and he has a pretty great grappling experience. He does get outstruck sometimes by people who can grapple with him a little bit, but it doesn't matter. Tresean Gore also got beat by a good striker in his last fight, Marco Tulio, and that was one of the beatdowns of the year. I loved that round 1. That was such a fun round, even though Gore took a crazy amount of punishment. But that was in April, man. That's crazy. That was, I think, UFC 314, and he's coming back already. That's a little bit scary for me. But before that, Tresean Gore had a couple of standing guillotine finishes, and he also lost to Cody Brundage and Brian Battle. So kind of a little bit of a up and down career here so far. Viera, on the other hand, really, the reason I'm going to go with Viera is that he was able to beat Cody Brundage and Gore wasn't. I know MMA math doesn't work that way, but Viera is able to beat guys like Armin Petrosian and Dustin Stoltzfus, who I feel like are just on that Tresean Gore level, just not quite that good, but good enough to keep in the UFC because they win every other fight. And I don't know. I'm going to go with Viera via first round submission, and I'm thinking an arm triangle because he's finished a lot of his MMA fights that way. Tresean Gore can grapple fairly well, but when you're going against a guy this good in the grappling, I can't go with it. So that's that. And then Rinya, I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh wait, we're on Rinya Nakamura versus Nathan Fletcher. What a fight here. Rinya is a talented Japanese wrestler who had won all of his fights until this January when he lost via a decision where he decided he didn't want to use his grappling. He was a huge, minus 500 favorite and still lost because of that. So that's really annoying. But nonetheless, Rinya, very good grappler there. Fletcher, on the other hand, he lost a close fight to Loughran in England in March. That was his last fight, but he's been doing decent. He's a pretty decent grappler, pretty decent striker. So, what do we got here? Rinya is a big favorite, and his wrestling should be good enough to really nullify anything that Fletcher has to offer. But, big but here, I am scared that he will just be dumb like his last fight and decide I'm just going to strike the whole time. I hope to God not, and I hope he learned, but it is very concerning to me. And so, with that being said, I am going to go with Nathan Fletcher. Huge underdog here. I'm going with him, but I'm not falling for the trick, Rinya Nakamura. You did this last time where I thought that you were going to grapple, but you didn't. I'm going to hope you prove me wrong, but it's not a bad idea to put some money here on Fletcher. He definitely could win this fight if Nakamura decides, I'm a striker now. So that's that fight. Danny Silva versus Kevin Vallejos. First of all, we're on to the main card now. Let's go. That was quick and easy, right? Danny Silva winning a split decision against UFC competition such as Lucas Almeida and Josh Kulibau. Kind of just decent fighters, right? Close fights though, so that's not what you want to see, but he's a decent striker. And then there is Kevin Vallejos, who is a prospect, as we talked about earlier. And although he only has one UFC win, there is a lot of hype behind him. Really, what I see in this fight, I don't see grappling being a problem for either person here. Vallejos is younger, faster, stronger, more powerful. I just think he should be able to hit Silva well enough. Silva has no grappling that I feel like will play a part in this fight. And so Kevin Vallejos should be the better striker here and win this via first round KO. He is a big favorite for a reason. And then we got Neil Magny versus Zaleski dos Santos. Neil Magny, basically, I mean, what can I say about him other than that he's fought basically everybody in the UFC and he loses to the best, or at least the top level opponents, but is able to turn back people who just aren't ready for the rankings yet. And, you know, Zaleski, on the other hand, he's 1-2 in his last couple fights, and he's lost to talented strikers. He's a decent striker himself, can grapple a little bit too. But this fight comes down to, is Neil Magny going to decline? Is he going to be able to turn back Zaleski? And it seems as though Neil Magny's not a good enough striker to beat Zaleski dos Santos, but Neil Magny is a crafty vet. He's got decent grappling, and he's beat a lot of the guys who aren't top level yet, and that's what I'm going to bank on here. I'm going to bank on Neil Magny winning this fight, because on paper he shouldn't probably win, but he hasn't shown me that there's any decline steeply in the skills that he has, and I just don't see Zaleski being that level of opponent that Neil Magny won't beat. So I'm going with Neil Magny via 29-28 close decision, but yeah, I just don't think Neil Magny is of the decline yet. I don't think he's on it yet. Just barely on the edge there. So moving on, Karol Rosa versus Nora Cornolle. Nora Cornolle is a, decent fighter. He actually finished a couple of her fights here, but she misses weight a lot. She has decent striking that can punish people and put them away. Really, Karol Rosas is a decision merchant. Hasn't done that well in the UFC in his last fights, really. Lost two out of her last 3 fights and is 3-3 in general in the UFC. I just don't see anything special about her. And in WMMA, I'm going with somebody who has a little bit more finishing potential. And so I'm going to go with Nora Cornolle via a decision. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's tough with WMMA. Moving on, Elvis Brenner, I should say, is a grappler. He's got a decent amount of UFC experience against high-level opponents such as Joel Alvarez and Miktabek Oralbai. He's lost both of those bouts, though, so he just, he doesn't have the striking that's not good enough to keep up with those guys. Whereas Ribovics, on the other hand, is a talented striker, able to beat guys like Daniel Zellhuber and Terrence McKinney. Really, man, Ribovics is talented enough to beat Brenner in the striking, and I just don't see Ribovics being that poor of a grappler to be submitted or even really controlled on the ground too well. So I'm going to go with Ribovics via a clinch knockout that Brenner just doesn't see coming because he's trying to rest in the clinch. These dudes who grapple just rest there forever and ever. So that's that. Again, those are my odds there. Just a little worse. I don't love these fights here. They're a little close, but nonetheless. All right. Onto the first fight where I actually semi-care about both fighters and how they're going to do in their career here. Mateus Rebecki. Again, he was in his fight of the year contender against Oralby, and that was a good fight. I don't know why my mic just ran away from me there. Whatever. Anyway, but before that, Rebecki lost to Diego Ferreira via third round ground and pound. Otherwise, he has beaten nearly everybody that was put in front of him, and he's been doing really well in his career. You can see 20-2. Pretty good there. Duncan, on the other hand, has a fluke submission finish against Jordan Vucenic in England. He is Scottish, so it's not hard, but he's facing the Englishman who had a lot of hype behind him too. Really, this fight comes down to the fact that can Rebecki outstrike Duncan? I would say yes, and can he survive the grappling as well? And based on previous skill sets that I have seen, Rebecki should be able to do that. So that is why I'm going to go with Duncan via submission, because he fluked it. And every time I think Chris Duncan, man, this guy's definitely not going to win this fight. He somehow pulls it off. He's like a magician, man. It's crazy to me. He doesn't look that great. He kind of has this like DDP-esque style, but man, I love it, man. Chris Duncan, I'm rooting for him. Maybe this probably isn't the smart pick because Rebecki should have the skills on paper to win this, but I don't know. I'm going to be a second round submission here. Rear naked choke for Chris Duncan. Rebecki might put himself in a bad position. I've seen that in the Oralby fight, although that was a slugfest, so hard to say. But nonetheless, moving on to the main event. What do we got? Tatsuro Taira versus HyunSung Park. I'm going with Taira via decision. Decent odds. I don't love this fight because of a lot of the unknowns, being a late notice 1 week fight for Park. Man, that's not great for either fighter, or picking fights either. So that's that. But what do I think about this? I mean, I think this is really interesting fight, and it comes down to the fact that Taira had a very interesting last performance against Brandon Royval, right? We kind of saw that Taira's striking wasn't quite good enough to keep up with those top level opponents in the bantamweight division. Not bantamweight, flyweight division. But his grappling is there, and it can be overwhelming at times. You know, Royval is a good enough grappler and striker that he can kind of get Taira into bad positions, or at least get out of the grappling and win the striking exchanges. But Taira did well enough that, you know, it did go to a split decision. It was a close fight. You could have saw it a couple of different ways there. But it showcased a lot about Taira's skills in his striking as well as his grappling, because he kind of just smudged a lot of people coming up on his run here. But Park, on the other hand, he kind of reminds me of Royval in that he's kind of a striker and a grappler. He can kind of do both, but the difference here is that Park has a little bit more power in his striking, whereas Royval is a little more of a volume striker. And the grappling is good enough for him that it's very interesting how he does against Taira. But I don't know if it's going to be enough. It'll be close. Really, Park is a submission threat, and he has 5 rear naked chokes out of his 10 career wins. I mean, that's a lot, right? So this could be a lot of different ways finished by Park, but what does this come down to? I just think that what matters is Taira going to be able to strike with Park? Has his striking improved well enough to be against people like Pantoja or the elites of the division like Royval again? Well, we will find out, really. Based on his last fight, I think Taira probably will be able to make the improvements, but it's tough to know. And especially against Park, who's kind of just a little bit of an unknown, right? He hasn't really faced that top-level opponents. You don't know if he's just a can crusher or truly an elite fighter. It's going to be tough to tell before this fight occurs where both of these guys are kind of at their point in their career, how much they've improved since their last fight. So all I really think about this is that the striking is less of a concern for me between both of these guys because it is flyweight, because Taira has shown an ability to kind of get hit clean and just walk through it. I mean, it was crazy, some of the shots he was taking from Royval, but I don't know, man. Taira's grappling is good, and he's kind of a positional grappler, so he doesn't gamble on submissions and just go for things, and that's where I think Park won't be able to win this fight. I just don't think he'll be able to get to the back and just take Taira's back like that. Taira is smart on the ground. He'll scramble. He'll make sure that the back isn't taken. He probably knows Park has those submissions, and I think Taira should be able to out-positionally win the grappling exchanges there. And because of that, I see Taira winning this fight via a 49-46 decision. I know it will probably be a close fight, and it's really hard to tell because Park is such an unknown there. But it should be a fun one. So moving on, we're just going to go quick through the parlays. We're going to skip the betting notes because not a lot to go over. But minus the 300 favorites all parlayed together, you can win $173.22 if you parlay $100 on that. I think that's like 5 fighters there. And then there are also a lot of close fights as well. So you can see you can win $4,681 if you parlay all the favorites. Put in some non-favorites there or underdogs, and you should be able to get a quick $5,000 if you get every pick correct. Although you are quite the better if you're doing that. But nonetheless, moving on to the final bits that you want to know about this card is the card review. Really terrible card. I only really care about like 1-2 fights out of this 12-fight card. Main event, maybe like half of the Chris Duncan and Mateus Rebecki fight. Like Kevin Vallejos, kind of, even though he's facing a can. It's tough, right? Same thing with the big fights. I mean, really the only big fight is that Taira Park fight, but do I even care about that much? I don't know. It's tough to tell. I guess I want to see Taira and how much better he's improved. But that's that. All my predictions have been updated, so I'm 41-56. Confident picks, 15 out of 19 so far. I'm at like above 70% basically for both of them. Pretty good. Yeah. That is that one. This is the Fight Night predictions for Tatsuro Taira versus HyunSung Park. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys later. Peace out.